Hey, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast. I'm Mike Harbour, and I'm building a community of leaders inspired to increase impact and influence all over the world. I've had the chance to learn from and partner with giants in the leadership business like John Maxwell and Paul Martinelli, among others. Not bad for a guy who grew up in a small rural town with no pedigree for leadership and barely graduating from high school. Here's what I know. The only guarantee that tomorrow is going to get better is that we grow today. Each podcast, we will be sharing practical and tangible advice, or maybe even some exciting interviews with the intention to inspire leaders to increase their impact and influence. Hey, Lead Up community, this is Mike Harbour. We are back with you on a beautiful summer day from Arkansas and our show for leaders, where we are providing practical and pragmatic ideas to help you increase your impact and your influence. One of the great ways to do this kind of, or add this kind of value, is the teaching that I deliver on a regular basis about leadership, teamwork, communication. But also, I love hearing from leaders around the globe who are making an impact and leading well in their own lives. So I'm excited again today to provide you with a guest interview on the Lead Up podcast. Our Lead Up guest knows how to lead and build a business. He's done it successfully several times, and he's been listed on the Inc. 5000 list. And now he's using that knowledge and expertise to help others find success. Todd Palmer is a thought leader, a CEO, an executive coach, an author who's committed to improving lives. And as a successful entrepreneur and business owner, he works with both individuals and companies to support corporate growth, foster business startups, guide leaders in the areas of talent management, workforce planning, and organizational development. As the CEO of a six-time Inc. 5000 company, Todd knows the struggles that businesses face around the areas of people, cash, strategy, and execution, all important areas for us to know as leaders. And through his firm, Extraordinary Advisors, Todd is able to guide leaders into programs and of sustained profitability. Sounds like an exciting guy. Todd, welcome to the Lead Up podcast. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn from you. You know, it's when you talk about people, cash, strategy, and execution. I'm an avid fan of a guy named I think Vern Harnish and Scaling Up. Are you familiar with Vern and his Scaling Up philosophy?
You know what? I actually know Vern. I was in a program, in the early 2000s. I graduated in 2006 from a program called the Birthing of Giants. So I was in Vern's last class when he was still the facilitator and the instructor. So yeah, I've known Vern since 2004. I've done work with him through the Scaling Up program. I've used some of their tools. I also know a guy here locally out of Detroit named Gino Wickman. He does a program called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Yeah,
and both are excellent. Traction. So you got Scaling Up and Traction, two great programs, two great books, two great blueprints for for growing and scaling a business. I think one is a little bit more. I think Attraction, it really is good for your zero to under $1 million to under $5 million company. Where Scaling Up, I think, due to its complexities and different layers, really services well to a larger organization. Sometimes with more, especially with stronger financial abilities with an internal controller or an internal CFO. But both programs, I think, bring so much value that anybody, if they hear nothing more of our podcast today, if they will pick up either Traction or Scaling Up, they're going to get great value.
Yeah, both fantastic books. As a matter of fact, I've got both of them literally right here beside my desk. I reference them frequently for my own business and just ideas that I talk to leaders about. And, so we'll get into this maybe, talking about gaining traction as a leader or scaling up as a leader in our conversation today. I want to talk to you a little bit about, leadership. That's what we do here on the Lead Up podcast, Todd, is talk leadership, share leadership ideas, helping leaders, business entrepreneurs grow and lead more effectively in all that they do. So I want to talk to you about kind of your mission, what it is that you do, how you got to where you're at from a leadership perspective. Let's tell our listeners about you a little bit.
Well, I think the first thing that I think it's important for any leader to recognize that it takes a team. So any organization that gets on the Inc. 5000 6 times like our company did, it takes a team of people to get there. It's not just the leader delivering things from their own center of influence and their own center of unique ability. It takes a team. I think when it comes to the leadership process, for me, it was something I had to grow into. I think being an entrepreneur in my early to mid 20s, I kind of had that rugged individualist attitude. I can, conquer the world. I had this attitude where I tell people, I thought I could jump out of a plane without a parachute, and somehow I'd land safely, which was not really true. I almost crashed and burned.
Mm-hmm.
And so that learning to be a leader was really important. But also, right, the final thing I've had to learn to be a good leader is to be able to recognize what my unique abilities are and to play to my strengths. And then to get people around me who can support those strengths and can deliver the ability to support what I saw as the vision. And for me, I worked with a guy named Simon Sinek, who wrote the book, the 3 Golden Circles, The Power of Why. And he helped me really figure out my unique ability, like you used in the intro, is I want to improve lives. I want to be able to help people create a life by design. So as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as business executives, we're not only having some work-life integration, but we're also getting a lot of satisfaction from the work we do.
Yeah, that's so good. That's starting with why. I love Simon Sinek. Love his ideas around leadership, and how starting with why. I mean, obviously the Golden Circle. That TED Talk is one of the most watched ever TED Talks. And I love to go back and reference that. If you're a leader listening to the Lead Up podcast today, just go YouTube, The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. And it's a fantastic 15 or 20 minute watch for you as well. Todd, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey, where you started, how you really got into leadership, what your background is.
So actually my background's in education. I used to, upon graduating from college, I taught at the university level. And then my life took a really interesting turn. I became a single parent at the age of 24. I had gotten custody of my son and I was raising him by myself. Recognized that in order to provide to him the kind of life I wanted him to have, that I wasn't going to be able to do that being a full-time employee, being an adjunct professor at night, going for my master's degree, and oh, by the way, trying to be a dad. It's like the pyramid needed to be flipped. I needed to be a dad first, and in order to do that, I needed to be able to control my time. I was kind of millennial before there was the millennial who was willing to trade freedom and flexibility for the corporate growth structure. And I found that for me, that it was really valuable to know what my priorities in life were. And my priority was my son. Then I quickly figured out that my secondary priority was I wanted to control my time. I wanted to control my career. And I felt the best way to do that was to start my own business. And I guess the reality I had to absorb was I wasn't a very good employee. I had too many ideas. I couldn't focus. I had the entrepreneurial ADD without even knowing it yet. So for me, I wrote a business plan. It was $140,000 to start. A 27-year-old divorced father. Nobody wants to give you $150,000 back in the mid-'90s. So I got a friend of mine to give me $15,000, and I started my company. Didn't even realize that I started the company at the most ideal time in the staff. I started a company, Diversified Industrial Staffing, in the staffing space. And I didn't realize back in 1996, 1997 that the country was where it is today. It's at full employment. If you can find people, companies will work with you, even if you have no track record, which I didn't. And by day 72, magically, I was actually making money. And that gave me an immense sense of confidence, but it was really false confidence in a lot of ways. There was a lot of economic factors and environmental factors coming at me that I didn't even realize, that I didn't even recognize. Looking back on it, 25 years later, I'm like, oh, I'm very thankful on a daily basis that I did what I did when I did it, but also I have to credit that unforeseen category of luck and how much of an influence it played on the early stages of our business.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. We got similar track records, kind of being in that staffing, headhunting arena. I'm the great thing about technology today is you and I we're recording this podcast virtually. You're sitting in Michigan. I'm in Arkansas. You said it's hot there. It's about 75 where you're at. It's about 87 in Arkansas. So it is summer. And I love the game of baseball. So this technology, right? I can see what is in your office. You got a bunch of baseballs behind you, a bunch of pictures of baseball players. It looks like a jersey, a number 13 jersey. That may be Cal Ripken's number. I don't know who. It's Cal Ripken's jersey. I don't know who that is.
That's actually Lance Parrish. He was a catcher for the Tigers back in the '84 World Series team.
Okay.
So I'm a huge baseball guy. And it's so interesting when, I'm talking to companies. I use a lot of because a lot of my clients are men.
Yeah.
And I'll use a lot of sports analogies because, think about baseball. Baseball is a sport predicated upon failure. You're
Mm-hmm.
successful if you fail 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
And when I talk to leaders about, and I said in baseball, you have to adjust pitch by pitch, at bat by at bat. And I actually still play competitive baseball. I play in Michigan, I play in Florida, I play in Arizona. And I use a lot of the concepts that, we as coaches in the leadership space apply to our clients. I apply it from baseball and reverse it back through, because so much of the sport is predicated on how quickly can we iterate, how quickly can we accept the fact that I struck out this time. All right, what did I learn this about? How can I do it differently next time? And it's an actively iterative process that comes in just like within business. So many clients that I work with are so uncomfortable failing forward into success. And I know it's a big John Maxwell thing. I know you're affiliated with that mentality and that program. But there's such value in skinning your knees and getting back up and learning a better way to do things. And honestly, I learned a lot of that from playing baseball.
Yeah. I love baseball is a great sport to learn how to fail forward, right? I mean, it's as John Maxwell wrote a book called Failing Forward. I wish I'd have learned that younger. I used to, when I played baseball through college. When I was younger, I didn't really learn that that baseball, you failed 70% of the time, right? Every time I struck out, I got mad. And that affects the next time you go to the plate and the next time you go to the plate. I was older. I was older really before I understood that, you got to fail. There's no such thing as perfection. That's how you get better. You go to the plate with a different mindset and, a different approach. Just like you talked about. And the same thing in leadership, right? Sometimes leadership is a daily, it's a daily grind. It's tough. We're working with people, but tomorrow's a new opportunity to go to the plate, right? And
totally
swing the bat again with people and with opportunities. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you're talking with leaders, you talk about failure and you talk about leading people. Maybe they failed today, but they've got a new opportunity to swing the bat and try again tomorrow. Talk to us about your philosophy around that.
Well, it's interesting. So as we talked about, I coach and you coach, and so we're constantly working with other people. But I struggle with it too. I still play baseball, and there's days, I hit the ball on the screws 3 out of 4 times, and I'm 0 for 4. The other days I dink it off the end of the bat, and I'm 3 for 4. Yet I actually hit the ball better the days I made the out. So I work a lot with my clients and how do we reframe what success looks like. And I still use a coach. Actually, I use one of the world's leading mindset and neuroscience thinkers out of the California, San Diego area. And he has a great quote. He's like, failure just doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. If you've learned something in the process and you're doing it differently, how have you ever really failed? Because all you've learned is one way it didn't work. So, and he has this great quote. He's like, failure is nothing more than another step along my pathway to being a success. And I embrace that in everything I do. And I still struggle with it. I got to call him like, yeah, I'm having a stinking thinking day. And I have to play a game on Thursday night. If I go 0 for 4, he'll be getting a text message on Friday. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I couldn't see the ball. I didn't hit it. I lose my mind. Same thing, like you said, happens in business. You can do everything right in your business some days, and you just can't get that sale. You can work with your staff, try to get them to do the things that need to be done. They do those things, and they come to you saying it didn't work. Well, what did you learn? What can we do differently tomorrow? It's the leaders, I think, that are so unable to shift their mindset and shift the direction they provide. Those are the ones who really get into the bad spot. It's those other leaders who say, okay, I tried it this way. I learned these 3 things of the 5-step process. These 2 steps didn't work. We're going to keep the 3 that worked, and we're going to try different things. Those are the ones who make a percentage change every day or every week in their business. So within a year, they're in a very different spot. I had a client, for example, he said, I want to make more money. I said, great. How do you think you're going to do that? Well, I'm just going to sell twice as much. I said, well, that's one way to do it. As we dug into the numbers, he's actually improved his margins from single digits to over almost 40% margins on the exact same revenue. And if he had only looked at the problem that I have to sell twice as much to make twice as much, he'd be in a doom loop. But because he was coachable, because he was willing to take a look at it from a multitude of different perspectives, he's now doing really well. In fact, he's probably doing better than he ever thought he would as quickly as he did. I mean, we did this in, less than 8 months.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I love, I love there's no such thing as failure, right? I mean, it reminded me of the quote, when Thomas Edison was asked why he continued to try to make a light bulb, right? He said, I've heard different numbers, but he said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just learned 10,000 ways that didn't work. And then
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar, Todd, with the book Carol Dweck wrote called Mindset, where
Yeah.
she talks about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And
Right.
you talked about that a little bit, but I think it's a fantastic book. Even for our listeners, if you're looking for a book to read, she talks about this whole idea of learning from our failures, right, and understanding that it is an opportunity for us to grow, and that we're not doomed to, as you called, the doom loop. We're not doomed to the same failures, the same things over and over and over again.
Exactly.
So fantastic book she wrote there. So
she's really done some pioneering work in that space, and I think so many leaders get so wrapped up. Going back to the Gazelles and the Scaling Up books and the EOS and the Traction book, those are all great tools.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to know why you're using the tools and how to apply the tools, and so much of it comes from the mindset of the leader. So I think the work that Dweck does, the work that Dr. Daniel Friedland does, is so key to leaders to take a look. If you want to have a great company, you need to become a great leader. And the hardest part is you got to clear your garbage out so you can go help other employees succeed. You got to clear your stuff out of the way so you can drive that business to the new level. And a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of leaders really struggle with that. So I applaud you for recommending programs in books like Carol's.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So tell me, who's the one leader in your life? One leader. I love this to ask this question of our guest. We've all had one, or maybe 101 people, but there's always been that one person, right, that had a huge impact on us as a leader. Who's that one person for you, and how did they impact you, and how's it impact you today as a leader?
I appreciate the question. I would say that the most impactful leader I've had is my older brother, Greg. He was, back in, the mid 2000s, he was running a publicly held company, 500 million more in revenue. He turned it around. They were doing really well, and he sold it. And he actually ended up becoming, we're 12 years apart. We actually became very close, because he helped me work on my business. And in the process, I learned about it so much, and how he led people, and how he was able to get people to do things that they didn't think they could do, and how he inspired that. And I learned from him so much of, it's the simplest things in business. It's the KPIs. It's the daily huddles. It's the daily accountabilities. And he would say to me 100 times, he goes, there's no silver bullet to being successful. It's putting your head down, doing the small little things every single day. And it creates that. And he was a big Jim Collins guy. It creates that flywheel effect. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, so I'm a big baseball guy. He's a big golf guy. He was a Division I athlete, got a college scholarship to golf. And his ability to focus and to discipline and to not let bad shots ruin his round made him successful as an athlete. But it also made him successful as an executive. So I would just get these little nuggets from him, these little things. And, we talk about the doom loop. He would just call it the tape in your head. And you gotta play a proper tape in your head every day so you can be successful. And he would say, you've got to do 5 positive things every day. 10 years later, 15 years later, I read, Sean Akers' work on gratitude. He's like, hey, write down 5 things you're thankful for every day. So he was so instrumental. In fact, for Father's Day, we just had a conversation about what influence he's had on my life and how much I've learned from him. And I really am so fortunate and so lucky, going back to the luck, so lucky that he was my brother, and he was available when I needed him. And he was willing to help me not only grow as a leader and as a business owner, but just as importantly, grow as a man. So I'd have to answer my brother, Greg, is the biggest leader I know.
Yeah, I love that. I like to ask that question because it reminds us, right? I think in the world we live in today, we take for granted those things that, right in front of us, right? The lessons.
Sure.
Because life is hard. Leadership is hard. And I like to remind people, hey, there's been at least one person in your life that helped you get to where you're at today. positive. Obviously, there's people have bad stuff in their life too. There's bad people in your life that helped you get to where you're at today, but you take the lessons from
Sure.
it, right? You take the lessons from that and move on. So, Todd, I want to ask you about a book. You wrote a book called The Job Search Process. Let's talk about what's in that book for our listeners, how it helps others in their job search.
Well, for me, it was a real labor of love. Being in the recruiting space for as long as I have been, I started, especially when we made the Inc. 5000 all those times, and you get invited to come talk to schools, you get invited to come talk to university and share the story. And I'm talking with the kids afterwards, and I'm asking them what their plans are upon graduation and where they're going to go. If they're graduated from high school, what their next steps are going to be, or if they graduate from college, how are they going to do? What are they doing to find their first job? And I was just blown away that so many kids just didn't have that guidance on how to find their first job. So they've inspired me to take what I'd done as a recruiter and put it into a book format so they could find their first job after school. So that's really why it's designed for. I see a spike every year around graduation time. We'll sell more books in a month sometimes than we'll sell the entire year because people are giving it as a graduation gift to kids. And it's so easy to use, and the fundamentals are so basic, which I learned from my brother. Is here's how you find a job. Here's what you got to do. Most kids don't know what recruiters know. Most kids don't know that 80% of jobs are never listed anywhere. They don't recognize that they're in the strongest employment opportunity of our lifetimes. I mean, we have the lowest labor participation rate in 50 years. Mm-hmm. Millennials have the country's at full employment at 3-4%. But if you look below the surface, the category of millennials in that age bracket is running at a 13% unemployed number. So if you're a millennial, you're looking to find your first job, you have a lot more competition maybe than you realize because a lot of your peers currently aren't working. That's one way to look at it. But also you have infinite possibility because you got boomers going out, the lowest labor participation rate in 50 years. So how do you market yourself to employers? By the way, you can apply to all the jobs on Indeed, ZipRecruiter. Those are great tools. But how do you go after those hidden jobs, those jobs that nobody knows are currently out there, whether they're tied to a recruiting firm or just an internal position? How do we get those kids to those jobs? So instead of being one of 100 resumes that someone reads, you're one of 2 resumes that someone receives, or one of 2 communications through LinkedIn to connect with people. So that's really what the book teaches people, is how to find their first job after high school or college. And there's 80% of jobs aren't listed.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and the job market's so different than it was, 30 years ago, 20 years ago even, right? So as far as I think the internet is fantastic because you and I are sitting here talking to each other over the internet. So it's a great tool,
Sure.
right? But when it comes to job search, yes, it's a fantastic tool if you know how to use it properly. But if you only rely on it and you wait for the stuff to come to you, right? Wait for those opportunities to come to you through the internet, you're gonna fail. And that's kind of what you just talked about. So where can we find your book? Tell us where we can find the book.
It's really easy. Just go to Amazon.com. The name of the book is The Job Search Process. And it's something that I'm really proud of. It's a labor of love. I'm working on my second book right now. It's on the entrepreneurial journey, wraps a lot around the failing forward into success mentality. Talk a lot about the struggles I had as an entrepreneur individually, struggles of other people. I reference people like Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken, Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, and how they overcame some struggles, as well as, as you're growing and building your business, how do you grow and build yourself as a leader too? Because it's so valuable that to know, like Sinek talks about, why you do what you do. What's going to get you out of bed on the days you don't want to get out of bed. I'm stunned at how many entrepreneurs, once we get below the surface, we're like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes I don't want to go into my own business and I'm the owner. I don't want to go in and manage people, yet I picked them all. I don't want to go in and deal with my customers, even though they're all my friends. I mean, it's amazing once they can have those honest conversations, how they can get unstuck. And I talk a lot about in the second book and how to do that yet. So hopefully that'll be out in the next year or so, and people will get value from that as well.
Yeah, that's good. So Todd, you're an Inc. 5000 CEO. Tell our listeners, what does that mean? What does an Inc. 5000 CEO mean? And how did you get there? What kind of company did you take there, and how, what was the process to get there?
Sure. So the company I took there was Diversified Industrial Staffing. It's a recruiting company that specializes in skilled trades permanent placements primarily in the manufacturing sector. So when people hear skilled trades, think of people who make things, welders, machinists, plant managers, people who actually build the products we use on a daily basis. And that was our niche. So we became very niche focused. So in 2006, the business was not doing well. I was about 9 years into the end of the run. I was $600,000 in debt, 60 days away from running out of cash. And I walked in September of 06 and fired the entire company and started over. And you think, wow, why would you want to tell your people today on the show this? Because we've all had dark days. We've all had bad days. I had a bad year, and I had to make some very difficult decisions. But if it wasn't for those tough decisions, we wouldn't have made the Inc. 5000 6 times. Because in order to do the Inc. 5000, you have to have run rates of revenue growth year over year over a 3-year cycle. So to be on the list 6 times basically meant we had a really good decade, because that leading indicator. And so when I let everybody go, I redid the entire company. We became niche focused. We focused on margin over revenue. I had only hired people who had a recruiting background prior to 06. I gave up that. I started hiring good people and taught them to be good recruiters. So came up with a concept called hire for DNA, not for resume. We started really figuring out where that supply and demand curve intersected. We figured out that there was a massive increase and a huge demand for skilled tradespeople. We also figured out that there were less and less of those workers every day. So if I could find that worker who was looking to leave, who was skilled and qualified, I could charge actually more than my competitors because I had them. Became like a talent agent in sports. So if I've got Mike Trout and you want him on your team, this is what he costs. And we would do that a lot. Mm-hmm. And so within 10 years, we were on the Inc. 5000 6 times. It was an amazing run, because typically if you make a list once, it's a pretty good accomplishment. To make it that many times, I owe it all to the team that I had with me. But just as importantly is we dug out of that $600,000 in debt because we became more profitable. We became more focused on how to use our cash appropriately. So now when I'm working with clients through Extraordinary Advisors, I tell them those things so that they, one, realize that, yeah, it's cool to be on the list and it's cool to have a success record, but there's a lot of hard work that went into it. There's a lot of suffering that went into it. There's a lot of failure that went into that success. So it's the kind of the complete package of leadership, of recognizing what wasn't working, then iterating into what eventually ended up getting us on the list 6 times.
Yeah. So, for our listeners, I think what you hear from Todd is he had to remake himself. And leadership, and I teach this, Todd, on almost every lesson I teach on the Lead Up podcast. Leadership's not something you do; it's someone you are. It's what you have to become, right? You have to become something different. You have to become a leader. It's in your being. It's not something you do. What you do is the byproduct of good leadership. Now, you can, if you don't remake yourself, right, then you end up exactly where you were, right? I mean, the 600,000 becomes 1.2 million if you don't totally remake yourself and become a better leader, but and get your mindset right. That's what leadership's all about. So kudos to you for being able to do that.
Well, I give you credit for getting that message out to people, because an entrepreneur alone is an entrepreneur at risk. And we get so isolated and we get such a cloak of imposter syndrome when things aren't going well. It's great that people have a resource like you to go to when they're having that tough day. Just pop on a podcast to get a little dose of positivity and a little dose of hope sometimes.
Yeah, that's what we hope. As well. So, Todd, what do you see one of the biggest challenges for leaders today, and what advice would you give them to overcome that challenge?
Well, I think what I see with my clients and what the feedback they give me is the biggest challenge isn't in the area of how do I get enough clients or how do I get enough capital. It's the biggest area is how do I get the right people. And people really seem to be maybe the differentiator in growing your business. And I always tell my clients that, listen, you got to understand, 10 years ago, coming off of a recession, it was an employer-controlled market. Now it's a candidate-controlled market. You've got your millennials who really do see the world of work very differently than your Gen X, certainly than your boomers. And this is the first time, I saw this stat the other day, this is the first time in history where we've essentially have 5 different generations sometimes working together in the same company. You got your founders, your boomers, and all the way you got I can't remember, the people following the millennials. And it's it's a crazy time from the perspective of we all have to work out how to get along. So communication becomes key, because if an employee is working for you and they don't like, the biggest reason people leave jobs isn't the money, it's their boss. Mm-hmm. The biggest resource for your next great employee is your current group of great employees. So it's a really important thing, and leaders need to focus a lot of time, effort, and attention on being a great boss, but not being a marshmallow, but setting those upfront expectations, recognizing that millennials like to work as part of teams and like to be included in the conversation of where the company is going and why they're going there. Simon Sinek 101. And they are willing to trade flexibility and freedom for more money. So throwing more money at somebody to get them to work longer hours doesn't work anymore. It's how do you put that money towards technology so they work smarter and less hours? It's a very difficult thing for some older leaders to understand, that your best employees necessarily aren't going to be the ones who are first in and last out. It's the ones who are producing the greatest work product, whether that work product's in the IT space, in the accounting space, in the construction space. It's how you got to work with people where they are now. And it's very different. I have clients all the time saying, well, when I was starting off, it was like this, or when it's like, well, those days are gone. Mm-hmm. You need work done today. This is how people look at it, whether you have to go to a gig economy and get people from an Upworks or freelancer.com, or you have to use a VA, or you have to hire somebody. People want to get the work done, and they're willing to do it differently. And you have to recognize that as a leader, that the way we get work done comes down to the great people you have, as well as how do you empower them to get the greatest work product out the door.
Yeah, so good. That's good advice. And just to kind of pull on a little leadership teaching from that, you said people don't leave companies, they leave leaders, right? They leave poor leadership.
Correct.
And so for us as leaders, if we don't want to have to keep replacing people and recruiting bodies, as I think you said, recruit for DNA, not for resume. I call it recruiting bodies, right? Recruit values-based people that fit the values of the company. If you don't want to keep recruiting bodies or recruiting resumes, then you have to become a better leader so people will quit leaving you, right? And going to the competition. So, that it just ties into our message here on the Lead Up Podcast, increasing our influence, increasing our impact. That's how we become better leaders. And that's a daily grind. We got to do that every single day. We got to be willing to kind of raise the bar on ourselves. Todd, what are you reading right now, or what are you listening to other than the Lead Up Podcast? What should other people listen to? What should our listeners listen to or read to help them grow as a leader?
Well, yeah, I think my favorite book that I've listened to recently, and I do a lot of listening to audiobooks. I find for me, it's a good way to start the day. I listen to the audiobook while being at the gym, so I'm getting my exercise out of the way, feeding my brain some new information. The book, one of my new favorite guys is a guy named Mark Manson. I don't know if you've checked any of his work out. It's a little blue in the language, but it's basically, the name of his book is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Blank. Fill in the blank.
Seen the book. Yeah.
And and I'm thinking, whoa, this is, but I actually got it from a friend of mine, and I'm now on my fourth, because there's so many nuggets of practical application of how to shift your mindset and how to look at the world with abundance, not scarcity, and how to focus on I'm a big believer that most people who start their own businesses want to have a life by design. That's what I figured out I wanted. Most of my clients want the same thing. And Manson talks about how to create a life by design. And it comes down to the simplest things. What Warren Buffett says is, I see 100 deals every day. I say no to 99 of them. Manson says the same thing in just a different way. I get 100 opportunities per day. I say no to 99 of them. It's how do we manage our time? How do we manage our energy? How do we create a life by design? And I just really find his book and his teachings to be really insightful. And he talks a lot I'm a big believer in speaking from experience versus speaking from advice. I think people will buy into your experience versus you telling them how to do something. And he does an excellent job of talking from experience and using relevant examples. And he references people like Pete Best, who was the drummer of the Beatles before Ringo Starr. So there's even a little history lesson in there. So I've really enjoyed that book. And if people can put up with the blue language, I think it's something they can really get a lot of value out of.
Yeah, that's Mark Manson is the name of that author for that book. I love Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't listen to him enough. He's got a lot of salty language too, but
Sure.
he tells truth, right? And he's got experience, and he's pushing the boundaries from what the old school entrepreneurial mindset to abundance and prosperity, and getting out of your own way, and taking risk, and that's what and leadership. We have to do that as well. I talk to a lot of corporate leaders, and they get so boxed into the bureaucracy of this is the way we lead. And I'm like, no, it's not working for you. Let's do some different things. We're talking to Todd Palmer of Extraordinary Advisors. Todd, this has been a fantastic conversation. One last question for you as we kind of bring the plane in for a landing here. What would you tell yourself, the Todd Palmer of 20 years ago, if you had the chance to go back and do it again, about leadership?
Well, it's interesting because in some respects, I've actually had that weird opportunity to do it. So when I was working, when I in 2006, when I let everybody go and I was on all that debt and everything, I'm talking to my brother, and he's saying, well, what do you think you should do? And I said, well, I think I should do this. Well, why didn't you do it? Well, I got talked out of it, or my board of advisors said it was a bad idea. And he was like, you got to trust your gut. Just trust your gut. Trust your gut. Trust your gut. And so for me, it was really realizing that sometimes entrepreneurs have a unique ability to see a vision of a future that others don't see. And I had that, but I didn't trust it. I was seeking, instead of having that internal validation mechanism, I was looking for that external validation. And I think, so that was like, so I find myself trusting my gut a lot more on my personal life decisions, on some of my other business decisions. And I've taken on a couple of clients that on the surface, you're like, why would you work with that company? I'm like, there's something in this entrepreneur. I think there's really some meat and some things I can help with, and they're coachable, all these different things. So I really find myself trusting my gut. But when it comes to trusting my gut, I have a checklist of how to check my gut. So I trust my gut, but I validate and verify. And I think just one piece of advice for any entrepreneur listening today would be, which I would have given it to myself years ago, is it's not about the revenue, it's about the margin. You can have a $10 million company with 3% margins. I've got a client right now. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of them. They're running at probably a little over $1 million this year, but their margins are 50%. I'm like, I said, when can I come work for you? I mean, these guys are killing it, but people get so wrapped up on this sexy number. I mean, when only 4 to 5% of companies ever reach $1 million in revenue, I see why people get excited about the number. I get all that, but really it's about the margin, and how do you then use that margin to create the life by design you want.
Yeah, that's good. Great advice. Trust your gut, but check it. So calculated gut feel, right? That's good. Todd, I'm honored to have met you and come in contact with you through our friends at Interview Valet. It was a pleasure to have you on the Lead Up podcast. Tell our listeners how they can find you. What's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to know more information about Todd Palmer?
Sure. The best place to catch me is on my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. And anybody who goes there, fills out the contact us page and wants to have a conversation about business or about mindset. I guess if you want to have a conversation about baseball, I can do that too. Just let me know you heard me on the Lead Up podcast here today. And I'm happy to give you a half hour of my time for free, no charge, just to kind of talk about, I had a guy heard me somehow. He was over in Australia. So I had to have a call with him with the 12-hour time difference. Very unique thing. Because I heard you on this podcast. I just had these 3 questions. And he's like, oh my gosh, that was powerful. The guy couldn't have been more excited. It just goes to the power of the internet, the power of the conversation. And for him, he goes, when you said an entrepreneur alone is an entrepreneur at risk, I'm like, I need to talk to that guy. I feel very much alone right now. That's what I'm here for. That's why we do the things that we do as coaches. And so I'm happy to give my time to anybody who mentions that they heard me up on the Lead Up show today.
That's fantastic. Hey, this has been Mike Harbour with Todd Palmer on the Lead Up podcast. As we always do, we ask you to share what you're learning, share the Lead Up podcast with your friends, your colleagues, other leaders out there. Be a river, not a reservoir, right? Share it with others. Let it flow in and through you so that you can continue to fill your cup up. And send a link to this interview so that they can learn more about Todd and Lead Up Podcast. Thank you for being a Lead Up listener, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Lead Up Podcast. Hope you enjoyed today's practical lesson on leadership. You know what? We should hang out in more places than just this podcast, though. I want you to find me on LinkedIn or in my Lead Up community on LinkedIn, or you can go over to Facebook. Find me on Facebook and in my Living on Purpose community there. Both of those, the Lead Up community on LinkedIn and the Living on Purpose community, are both private groups where we can share and inspire each other to continue to lead up and live on purpose in different areas of our life. Until next time, keep leading up.